Hey man, how is life? I'm actually re-recording this video because I am very unhappy with the first version, and then I realized I won't be able to give a demo. I will talk about this later. So this video is about open corporates and how to use its data. Open corporates is a data source which provides info on companies and its officers. So, for example, this is awesome for, let's say, commercial real estates where you need to know who to call. Like you will have a property, probably you will have the owner of the property, and you want to find the decision maker of of the company related to the property. Open corporates has many endpoints, but we will focus on two. One is company search, and another one is uh, company's jurisdiction, company number. And we will talk about the challenges. Uh, so obviously, this endpoint is called when you want to get uh, this internal ID. So at this point, you don't have the company number. A company number is essentially uh, open corporates internal ID of the company. Now, open corporates, I might call it OC, just to keep it short. And there is no jurisdiction code at this point. One can just guess. So one needs to use company name plus additional information to keep the number of results low. Ideally, there should be only one company in the result, and it should match the company you're trying to looking for. But that's not always the case. So we can one can use, for example, company name plus address or part of some address info, not a whole address. One can use if that doesn't work, let's say company name plus jurisdiction code might happen, might be used, and the goal is to get um, a one company in the response, and to get the this ID and jurisdiction code, and to use that in this for this endpoint, because here we need to have jurisdiction code and company number, and this endpoint gives us officers. Now, what are the challenges? The challenges are there are actually many, as expected. There are actually many. For example, the name you have in your CRM, and we are talking about the same company, might not match the name that can be found in OC. For example, if you have in Salesforce or any other CRM, if you have ABC Legal, maybe uh, OC will have it as ABC Legal LLC. Maybe it will have it that way, for example. And this is why it's desirable to use some additional info like address just to narrow it down. And let's say in the reply, instead of LLC, you might get LL, or let's say compound. This is something I faced last week. So OC's data is definitely not clean. So relying on hard coding won't work, right? And also address might be different between two systems. Maybe zip code or maybe street number that might be uh, different. Now, if this fails, one can try to use company name plus jurisdiction code. And now jurisdiction code it has two parts. So one part defines the country, and another part defines the county or the state of that country. So, for example, if you're talking about, I don't know, New York in the U.S., the code will be U.S. New York, right? The problem is that guessing this code doesn't work often. Uh, because if a company operates, for example, in New York, it doesn't mean it's registered in New York, that it was founded in New York. Might Maybe it's founded in Delaware, for example. So guessing the jurisdiction code might be a problem, and I would say 30%, 30, 40 of percent, 30, 40% of the time, you cannot find the company info this way. So then we will talk about that later, what could be done. But if a company number is there and in the jurisdiction is there, second endpoint can be used. And the goal of this endpoint to get the officers. Now, when I say an officer, obviously I'm talking about the people who are. I cannot say people who work in in that company, but the people who are somehow related to that company. So we can have agents, partners, directors, presidents, vice presidents, and stuff like that. And obviously, if we're planning to land a call, we want to call C-level people, right? Like presidents, directors, and other C-level roles. Um, there are multiple challenges here, and for example, sometimes there are no decision makers, C-level people in the response. So I can remember one case where one LLC, we called an endpoint for one LLC, and we got three agents in the response. Three officers, three agents. None of them is a decision maker. And agents are obviously not C-level people. So the question is, what do we do there? What to do there, right? Another huge challenge is that very often there are companies within officers. So, for example, if we have a corporation and you call, and so you have Air Corporation here, you call this endpoint, you got the ID and jurisdiction code, then you go here to find officers. Maybe you might get ALC as a reply, meaning that this is the parent company of LLC, or this is a child company of ALC. Meaning, in that case, when that happens, you need to get this name and repeat the process. So for this company, you need to call this endpoint to get the company number jurisdiction code, and then you need to call it again to get its officers. So you're getting officers for a corporation, but if there is a parent, then you need to get officers of the parent as well. Meaning that if we are talking about a huge company, this hierarchy can be huge. Let's say last week when I was debugging this, there was one company with four, and when we called this endpoint, we got four LLCs in the response. This happens. So linking between those companies must be done in the CRM. Another challenge is that OC roles are chaotic, and OC doesn't have a list of roles published on the website. Meaning, this is something you need to figure out on your own. And roles are just chaotic. For example, it can be vice president, it can be VP, it can be V dot P dot, it can be vice, it can be vice president like this with a dash, but not M dash, with a normal dash. Um, and that's the same role. So there has to be a way to pull all those roles and match them against the roles in the CRM. Let's, in this concrete case, match them against the roles in Salesforce. Another challenge is that one officer might have several roles. It can one officer can be agent, director, and let's say, I don't know, something else. President, for example. What to do there? So all these challenges must be addressed if the goal is to fully automate the procedure. Of course, it's possible to provide some screens to the user, especially in Salesforce, when one of these challenges is faced. But that's time consuming because if you're a salesperson, your duty is to call, not to not to let's say spend a lot of time on pulling officers, right? So in the ideal world, these should be totally automated. You make one click and and LLC gets pulled, its officers, and if there is a parent, the hierarchy tree is created, and everything gets pushed to Celsius automatically within few seconds. That's the ideal world. Now, that's this solution, right? Now, unfortunately, I cannot demo this. Actually, my plan was to make a video series of 2 or 3 parts. But then I realized that I will need to blur um, my client's data, uh, ID or OCIDs, and whenever data is pulled, OCIDs gets displayed. For comparison, I will need to blur all those addresses from Salesforce, from OC. And that basically kills the point of making these videos, right? Uh, I don't see a way how to publish a video about the component itself. But if someone is interested, I can provide a demo. And yeah, so what happens right now is that when a button is clicked in Salesforce, this gets executed automatically. Now the final step, and it's a step where these two calls fail. In this step, uh, which has to be manual. Actually, there are 2 options. One way would be to do this with an AI agent. You're just passing the name and and everything and all the info on the company and saying to the agent, "Here is the info. Here are the creds. Here is the API or MCP, whatever. Go there and find me the company." But as we know, AI is not that reliable and it would make a lot of errors. So this could be done with AI, or another way would be, which is our preferred method, is to uh, give a list of all options to the user. So it's a manual step with IDs, addresses, so the user would be able to compare to see what's going on. And when one company is selected, it gets pushed automatically, and these 2 steps get executed automatically. So this is the only manual step. When these 2 calls fail, usually there are many companies to choose from. So this is the manual step, and when one company is selected, everything else gets automated. If for more information, please leave a comment and I will reply as soon as possible. Thank you.